Okay, finally, here we are. Today we are going to be discussing reserves and initiative. Hopefully, this is my last video in the series teaching the line of battle game system. I've been talking about doing a video on reserves and initiative for probably close to a year, so this is a long time coming. Let me tell you that I have not prepared for it. I do have a Samuel Adams Boston Lager here that's going to be helping me out. If you've not watched the videos on orders, I believe it's the 7th and the 8th video in the series, go watch those before you watch this one. You're going to be a little confused, I think, if you don't have a good foundation of what the order system is. Reserves and initiative are basically an extension or part of what's going on in the order system. If you look here, you'll notice I have up a fairly simple, fairly basic outline for what a army might look like in regards to its structure. You've got the army commander who's issuing the orders. They're going to be writing those orders to a corps commander, and he's going to be sending those down to his divisions. Below the divisional level, you've got your brigades. Now, every army is going to be totally different. Sometimes we might be skipping a corps and we might be sending orders directly to divisions. That's all possible. All of those circumstances are going to be covered in game-specific rules. Hell, maybe we're even sending orders to brigades. Don't know if that's in any of the games that are out now, but maybe in the future. So let's start by talking about reserves. I don't want to just read off the rules here, because the point of this is to explain it so you don't have to hopefully do that. But I think it's good to go through. If you're looking at the Line of Battle 2.0 rules, you want to go to page 2829. And there's really two things that reserve is going to give the player. Reserve is going to be used as a tool for any of your formations or commands that are under attack orders. A reserve that's a part of a formation that's under an attack order is going to give that leader a better modifier when he's making a fluke stoppage roll. Now, if you remember from the previous video, any formation at the divisional level is going to be making fluke stoppage rolls. This is the system's way of taking control away from the player and throwing a wrench into whatever their plans are. Each turn, a division that's under an attack order has to make a die roll. The base check on this is going to be a 6 or more. If you look at your charts, you can see the fluke stoppage table. Base check, you pass on a modified 6 or better. One of the most important things that reserves are going to do, not one of, the most important thing reserves are going to do are they are going to make the likelihood of a fluke stoppage much, much less. So let's say we have a command that's under an attack order. There's a division that's making an attack, and that division has a unit in reserve or a brigade. We'll talk about that here in a second. They are going to add a +2 to whatever their roll is on that base check. So given that, the only circumstance in which they're going to fail that roll is a 3 or less. Now, I'm not going to say that's never going to happen, because trust me, it does, but it's a lot better off having that reserve if you don't want your attack to stall out. There are some other modifiers here. Don't worry about those. So, what kind of reserve? How do we physically manipulate a reserve? What's that look like on the map? Yeah, okay, Nick, we want it for the fluke stoppage table, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's go to the rules here. Let's zoom out. Let's find it. Reserve modifier. So, a division has reserves for purposes of fluke stoppage table modifier if all of the following conditions are true. The reserve cannot contain any wrecked or destroyed regiments. They have to stay out of range of small arms. Cav can never be reserved for infantry, and the reserve consists of only one regiment. If that's the instance, it cannot be disorganized or routed. So if you've got a division that has 3 brigades in it, you are going to have one complete brigade as being specified in reserve. A couple other stipulations. Any unit that's in reserve always has to be in column formation. So that situation down here where no enemy small arms unit can fire on it, well, you don't want to be close to the enemy anyways, because if you get fired at when you're in column, you're considered to have an all-round rear facing. If you have a division that has 1 or 2 brigades, then you only need 1 full-strength regiment. So when and how are reserves assigned in this manner? Typically what you're going to be doing is when an attack order is written, you're going to specify put a unit in reserve or put a brigade in reserve for that command. You don't have to do that. As the player, you're free to, when you accept an attack order, just say, okay, we've accepted our attack order. I'm going to put this formation or this regiment in reserve, and boom, we're off to the races. These guys can be released from reserve, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So what's this look like in a game situation? I've pulled up the None But Heroes map, and this is a game that my Uncle John and I played a couple years ago. Awesome game. If you don't have it, pick it up. It might be a little expensive on the secondary market, but it's a very good game. This might look like a bit of a cluster, but just hang with me here for a second. So let me find where we're at. If we look at Sumner's Corps, so the 2nd Corps, that is going to be all of these lightly blue colored units, right? So I believe in this instance, Sumner's Corps has 3 divisions. What does that mean? Well, that means if we want to reserve, we're going to need each one of those divisions to have its own special reserve. Did that just make sense, or did I confuse myself? Let me check here. Let's find the 2nd division of Sumner's Corps. So here's French. He's the 3rd division. Sedgwick. Here we go. So up here we have Sedgwick. He's a divisional leader. He's under attack orders. Underneath him, he has the Philly Brigade, which you'll see is under Howard. He has Gorman's Brigade, and he also has Dana's Brigade. So there's 3 brigades sitting all very close to each other in Sedgwick's division under Sumner's Corps. In order for Sedgwick's division to get the benefit of the +2 on the fluke stoppage, he requires an entire brigade to be sitting in reserve. That's what we have right here. So Dana, his entire brigade, is currently sitting with reserve markers on them. Now in that instance, that must be an error on my part when we were playing, because those guys are not flipped into column. They should be in column. Maybe we got lazy when we were playing. I can't remember. This was a while ago. But those guys should be in column. So that's kind of what that looks like. You'll see here it looks like there's some other brigades that are in reserves for the 3rd Corps, or the 3rd Division of the 2nd Corps. There's some reserves down here for the 1st Division of the 2nd Corps. So we got, looks like that corps is in pretty good shape with their reserves. Moving on, let's talk about the second tool that the player has in their bag for using reserves. When an order is written, entire formations themselves can be ordered into reserve. Let's say that as the Confederate player in this situation, I have a division that's maybe off sitting back here that I'm not fully ready to commit to a situation. I want to hold on to that division. I want to have them be ready to react to a situation, but I don't want to fully commit them. This is where putting an entire formation into reserve is important. So in this instance, you'll see we have some Confederate units right here that are specified as being in reserve. If we look at these units, we've got Barksdale's Brigade, Sanders' Brigade, Kershaw, Semmes, and ultimately McLaws and the McLaws Divisional Headquarters. All of these units are sitting in reserve. They're all in column. They're all out of small arms range. Cool, we're set up. How did this happen? Most likely, Robert E. Lee issued an order to McLaws that said, move to this location and put yourself into reserve. Okay, why would we do that? Well, let's say at that time when that order was issued, those guys weren't really needed anywhere. Lee's not prepared to commit them to a location. What being in reserve is going to do is it's going to give us a +2 modifier when we attempt to come out of reserve. So if Lee determines that a situation has become precarious and he wants to commit McLaws, and he writes an order and sends it to McLaws. McLaws is a 3-rated general, so he would typically need a 7 or better to accept whatever that order is that Lee wrote. In this instance, as he's in reserve, he's going to get the benefit of a +2 modifier to his command roll. So if he rolls a 5, boom, he's got the order, he's good to go. Putting formations into reserve is going to be a great way to potentially increase the ability to react to certain situations. I'm a huge proponent of doing what you see right here. In this instance, you might notice that we have some Union units coming through the sunken lane right here. That's getting a little bit precarious. In this instance, Lee might, write an attack order for McLaws to come out here and try to push back and set up a defensive position right here. If this attack is going really well, heck, they could be up to here in the next turn. So getting that acceptance roll can become very, very important. You'll see down here we have a couple reserves just down in some other locations. 9th Corps has 1 regiment in reserve, so in that division there's likely only 2 brigades. Not likely, there is only 2 brigades. I'm telling you that because that's the rule. So that's kind of an explanation as to the 2 ways to use reserve. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Just remember that anytime a unit is in reserve, or a unit or a formation, and you're doing it under attack orders, and you're following all the guidelines listed right here, you're going to get that +2 modifier for fluke stoppage. Also note that if you have formations under reserve status and they accept an order, or try to accept an order and make a command roll, that's going to be beneficial to their command roll. Those are the only 2 things that reserves are going to do. Now, let's talk about initiative. Players in the old RSS series might remember initiative. I gotta find where I'm going here. Very different than the way it is in line of battle. Initiative has been stripped of some of its teeth. RSS initiative was pretty straightforward. You'd roll a 2d6. You'd look at some, I believe it's percentile dice. If you passed, you could write yourself any order. It could be an attack order, a move order. Not the case here. Initiative, as a rule of thumb, using the standard system rules, is only going to be used to do some specific things. You cannot, as a leader, take initiative and issue yourself move or attack orders unless specified in game specific rules. What can you do using initiative? So, any Confederate artillery battalions in Gettysburg, any Confederate artillery battalions in Antietam, so that'd be Last Chance for Victory or None But Heroes, they are going to be using initiative with their artillery leaders to move that artillery headquarters. Most of those battalions are free to kind of move where they want. That is how they're going to reposition themselves. Let's say a player issued an order to a corps to move all the way across the map using this road via this route. Well, let's say the enemy cavalry brigade blocks you and you're screwed and you don't like it and you say, oh shit, I need to change that. This is terrible. You can use initiative in an attempt to modify an existing order as to route or timing. So you could change perhaps the route you're taking to get to your location. You can perhaps change how quickly you're doing it if you want to drag your feet a little bit, those sorts of things. The other thing you can do in that instance, let's say you're under a move order and a cav brigade shows up on the road and you need to move past them. Well, if you remember, when you're under a move order, you have to be in column, so you can't effectively defend yourself in that situation. You can use initiative with a leader in an attempt to deploy a command during a move order. So if you do that, that leader who's under that move order can make a command roll. If he succeeds, he's going to be able to deploy his entire command. They can flip into line. Then at least you're able to put up a defensive front instead of being in column and moving directly into the enemy. Remember, the crux of this game system is doing what your orders say, even if you don't like them. That's very hard for some people to understand or grasp. Initiative ties into reserve in a pretty important way. You can use initiative to release a reserve from reserve status. So let's say you have one of those units that's under a reserve as part of a divisional attack. Well, your divisional leader can roll to release him from reserve. He can deploy and he can take part in the attack in the following activity phase. So just because you put somebody into reserve to help with that fluke stoppage modifier doesn't mean he has to stay there. You can attempt to release him via initiative. The key there is attempt. You're not always going to succeed in that. Very important. Also, initiative is used to counterattack in order to allow a formation to recapture terrain lost by another friendly defending formation. The formation obtaining this initiative must have already been assigned reserve status in an earlier order. So, let's pretend for an instance that we go back to our situation with McLaw's division sitting right here. Let us pretend, let's find the right, I'm going to make you guys sick here, moving this all around. Let's pretend these guys are formed up into this position and all these guys come through here and they just overrun. And this position's taken. These guys are all dead. They're gone. They are no longer in existence. And you're sitting there saying, oh, this is bad. If Lee fails in issuing an order to McLaws, or whatever the circumstance might be, let's say Lee's not even close, Lee's issuing orders to other things, he's preoccupied, McLaws can attempt to take initiative because he's already placed in reserve, and he can counterattack into this location to retake all of that lost ground. He's basically giving himself a de facto attack order, but it has to be a position that was previously occupied by friendly units. McLaws can't give himself initiative and then say, oh, we're going to run across here, then we're going to go attack McClellan's headquarters and do all this funky stuff. Nope. It has to be within areas that you had previously defended. And that could stretch really anywhere throughout the map. Let's say, you've got these units further up and First Corps just powers through, right? Well, they're powering through. they're moving down here, and you say, okay, that's enough. McLaws can attempt to release himself from initiative and give him a de facto attack order to move up here to retake this ground. He can't run all the way up the Hagerstown Pike and attack Pleasanton's Cav Division headquarters up here, because that's not ground that was held by a friendly unit previously. But it gives the player a little bit of flexibility, especially in defense. Okay, so that's a lot of talking. Let's talk about, well, I think that's really everything here. Note that, just for the sake of attempting to dissuade you guys from being confused, in None But Heroes, so that's what we're looking at here, the Battle of Antietam, the Confederate player, any leader can attempt to give themselves orders via initiative. Those can be attack or move orders. The Confederate Army was very mobile in this instance. They knew what they were up against. They knew they were outnumbered. All of their leadership was kind of under the understanding that they needed to do maybe things on their own to a certain extent. So in this instance, leaders can give themselves initiative to move or attack. Those could be orders that are outside of, you know, the defensive limitations with units being under reserve. I have a feeling that future games will also allow that. I can't remember if To Take Washington has anything like that in it, to be honest. I do not think Last Chance for Victory does. Talking about command structure, Last Chance for Victory is very much set up in this fashion. You have corps, you have divisions underneath those corps, and you have your brigades underneath those divisions. Off the top of my head, I really don't remember there being special rules for orders being issued directly to divisions, or brigades for that matter. Both armies are like that. Last Chance for Victory is probably the easiest way to understand the command system. Now, there's a lot of units there, so there's a lot going on. But from the standpoint of, if you're reading the rules and then you want to go play something, that's going to be very much set up like this. None But Heroes, the Union player is set up in that structure, but the Confederate player is set up totally differently. That really gives each side a totally different feel, which is cool. None But Heroes, the Union player, obviously has a lot more strength. They can bring more firepower to bear, but they're going to be a little more cumbersome because of that command structure. Whew. Okay. So I think that's really it. Couple things to remember. Always set your attack orders with reserves. One thing I will mention is that the rules as written state that if you don't do it when you accept the attack order, you can never go back and add a reserve. I don't like that rule. My Uncle John and I were typically playing each other whenever I play these games. We kind of have a gentlemanly agreement that if you undertake an attack order and you forget to put a reserve on map when you're supposed to, well, we allow you to do it or attempt to do it in a subsequent command phase if your leader makes a successful initiative roll. So we kind of use initiative to maybe put some units in reserve that didn't start in reserve. Now, you can't just run around the board and put anybody into reserve via initiative. It's only if somebody's under an attack order and you want to put them into reserve. That's something I would probably say if you're new to the system or you're not playing competitively, just do that. It's not going to kill anybody. That is one rule that we have a tendency to forget. The other thing I really wish they would do in future games is actually create reserve markers. If you're any gamer that's worth a salt, you probably have all sorts of KTX markers and little blocks and all sorts of things that you can use as your reserve signifiers. But I just want counters, really, just put them in there. Makes it easy. Otherwise, you really have no idea who is in reserve unless you mark them when you're looking at a battle that's big like this. Let me look through here real quick, make sure there's nothing else we want to talk about. The big thing with initiative is that players just need to be familiar with their army structure and also what the game-specific rules are. I think the way the system rules are written is they're going to let game designers use initiative for things that are not necessarily outlined in the rules as written. I think that's a good thing because they're pretty cut and dry as system rules, but it leaves a lot open for someone who wants to potentially game a different situation or design their own game. It can be a little bit confusing, but I think if you guys stick with it, it's not tough. The order system is really cool. You can play a lot of these games, a lot of these scenarios without the order system, where the orders might be provided for you at the beginning of the scenario and you're just following them and undertaking them. But these larger campaigns really are a lot of fun once you have to start doing things that are not necessarily optimal. So that's kind of my piece there. Don't think there's anything else I really want to talk about. That should cover it. If you guys have questions on something, like I said, send me a message in the video message area, I guess is what they call that, and I'll do my best to answer it. Or if you know my handle on Board Game Geek, send me a message on there, and I'm willing to help. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope this series is helping new players get into the system. I really think it is the quintessential American Civil War game system if you're looking for something that strikes a really good balance between playability, rules overhead, and ultimately fun. We play these things because they're fun. So if you're getting pulled down by the minutia of separating regiments into, little tiny units and putting flank markers on them and running out of ammunition for each one of your regiments in a battle of this size, maybe this isn't the system for you. It's not as down into the weeds. Now, smaller battles, maybe that'd be fun. Who knows? Get out there, put some counters on the map, play, and share your experiences. Get on Facebook, has a Line of Battle RSS CWBS fan group. So if you're playing something, get on there, post some pictures. People like to see that stuff. The community for this system is not nearly as active as great battles of the American Civil War, and frankly that's frustrating for me because I think this is the superior system. So get out there, have fun, play some games. Talk to you guys soon. This might be a new record for getting another video out after one I just did like a week ago. So see ya.